Number 1. The Reduced House. When I was a teenager, my parents were pretty permissive about what I could and couldn't do. I guess I should just say could do, as they never really told me what I couldn't do. So after school, I would spend all the time at my best friend Reed's house. He had a lot more video game systems than I did, and more games, so I could spend hours and hours in his parents' basement playing with them. I would then walk home really late at night. My whole family would generally be asleep. This was a regular thing for many years, so by the time this story happened, it was routine. And there was one thing that I always noticed on the way home, too, and that was this house. It was a completely normal house that really didn't look any different than the houses around it. It wasn't really out of place, and that was not what I meant. Or at least in looks it wasn't. For years, from junior high school on, the house was always for sale. No one lived in it, no matter what. I know you know about places like this. People see houses that are unoccupied, and they all make up stories about it. I don't really believe that sort of thing, though. You know, the whole house is haunting sort of thing. But regardless of what I believe, I can tell you that the house was creepy. Very creepy. So when I was 17, on a Friday night, I had been at Reed's house really late. It was a weekend, so around 2 a.m., I began making my way home. I was immediately surprised, though, with how foggy it was outside. I supposed it was because it was beginning to get cold outside lately, and the ground was still warm. But it was extremely foggy, so much that it was really hard to see where I was going. But I had made this walk thousands of times, and it was still second nature to me. I even knew the exact moment that I passed by the house that was always for sale. And when I did, a thought occurred to me. I began wondering what that house might look like if it was covered in a deep fog. It was spooky looking to begin with. I reached in, grabbed my cell phone, and turned on the light. Shining it at the house, it did look pretty spooky, and the light was also shining off the fog, which was pretty cool looking too. It was then that my gaze lowered to the for sale sign. It had a sign on it now that said, reduced. For some reason I thought this was weird. I guess it didn't have to be. A house being on sale for years could be reduced because no one wanted to buy it. But at the time, I just thought it was really weird for some reason. And although I eventually walked home and got out of the fog, I couldn't get it out of my head how weird I thought that was. When I brought it up to Reed, he said it didn't surprise him. According to him, the reason why the house was empty was because a family was murdered there, and it was haunted. You know, the typical answer any kid would give for why a house was going unsold. I never bought it, really. You know, the Amityville house never went unsold. It was bought within a year of the murders. Then, a year after the Lutz family moved out, and it was inhabited constantly afterwards by 3 owners, each living 10 to 20 years in the residence, and always finding a buyer. So, I didn't buy the crap about murder houses going empty. I just went home. But I did tell Reed about it the other day, and he just fell back on the murder story, and the possibility that the place might be haunted. While we played video games, He kept going back to the topic, though. He suggested that maybe I should try breaking into the house and checking it out, stuff like that. I have to admit that I did begin thinking about it. That night, as I walked home, it was just as foggy as it had been the previous night. And when I went by the house, I began thinking about what Reed had said. It was tempting, and I honestly wanted to go and see if there was anything weird about the house. I finally decided to do it, but I thought it would be better to do it in the backyard. If I broke and entered a home, even an empty home, it seemed like it would be best to do it in a place that no one else could see you. So I went around, and I tried to find one of the easiest ways to get in. I was surprised when I found one of the windows were unlocked, and there was no screen. So I opened up the window and dragged myself into the house. I didn't turn on any of the lights, because I guess I assumed the electricity wouldn't even be on. So I began looking around the house. There was nothing weird about the house, really. It was dark and dusty. I supposed it hadn't had a good cleaning, but maybe that's why it didn't sell. But there was nothing in it that indicated to me why no one would want to live in the house. And then, that's when I walked into the living room, and I saw it. In the far corner of the room, there was a man slumped over in the corner. He was leaned up against the corner, one leg splayed and the other crooked. He had a knife in his hand that he was using to whittle a piece of wood, and he was looking right at me. I couldn't see his face because it was so dark, and before I could react in any way, the man said in a very scary voice, "What the fuck are you doing in my house?" He jumped to his feet, quicker than I thought possible, and rushed at me. He would have caught me if my flight instinct hadn't kicked in, and it pulled me out of the room. I jumped out of the window like Superman and landed on the ground. Looking back, I saw him in the window, one of his legs already out as if he were coming for me. I did the only thing I could do. I booked. I ran like the great Jesse Owens, and no one could catch me. And I didn't stop until my candy ass was home. No, I didn't call the police, because I had no idea what I would tell them. The only person that I talked to about this was Reed. He didn't believe me. He thought I was trying to scare him, like he always did to me. I can't blame him. I began taking a different way to my friend's house, and I never walked by that house again. Number 2. The smell. I don't have a freaking car, and it sucks. And whenever I go anywhere, I have to go by foot. It gets old pretty quickly. Anyhow, I didn't write you to complain. I wrote you to tell you about something that happened to me one night when I was walking in the fog. I live in a small town. I think the biggest thing about my town is that it is right off an exit to a major highway. So right off the exit, there are a lot of fast food restaurants and gas stations. There are a lot of out-of-towners, of course, shopping there. However, when nighttime hits, there are fewer people. I was sitting at home. I was up really late. I had slept all day and was looking for something to do. I was out of beer and figured I could walk to the gas station and get me some. So I set out walking. We usually don't have really thick fogs, but this one was pretty thick. I could only see a foot or two in front of me clearly. It was like the fog that I always read about in stories, but had never seen in real life. I almost changed my mind about going, but then I realized how much I really wanted that beer. So I kept on going. I got to the end of my neighborhood and began walking along the highway. Now, this wasn't the freeway that they got off of. this was the highway that the businesses were on. However, it was an empty highway where I was. I had to go over a bridge that spanned a train track in a forest, and then down a short hill in order to get to the gas station. As I was walking, I made it to the bridge. Keep in mind, it was still difficult to see anything as I went along, so the bridge was very intimidating. As I was walking, I started smelling something. It took me a few moments to figure out exactly what it was, though. It was wood burning. My grandma used to have a wood-burning stove in her living room, and it smelled exactly like that. I thought it was odd, but then I thought, there's a forest under the bridge. What if there is a forest fire or something, and maybe I should check it out? I made my way to the far side of the bridge, and once I got there, I looked down the hill, which was steep, and wondered if it was too steep to get down to the train tracks. I'd never actually been down there before. I walked a little bit down the tree in the fog, bracing myself as I went down the hill. With each step, I considered turning around and making my way back up the hill, but the smell got stronger as I went further down. I honestly thought that there might be a small forest fire, and if I put it out or reported it, I would be able to do something about it. "Who the hell are you?" I heard a loud voice yell at me. I looked around, but I was unable to see anyone in the thick fog. When I heard it, I slipped a bit on the hill and fell on my butt, skidding down the hill a bit. But then, in the fog, I saw the hugest man I had ever seen in my lifetime, and he was making his way, quickly, up the hill. I scampered to my feet, getting mud all over me. I kept my eyes on the man as I got up and I tried to turn around. "What the hell did you see?" he asked me as he made his way up the hill. "What the hell did you see?" I didn't see anything," I replied and turned around. I tried to get up the hill. I fell down on my face again, but got up quick and ran up the hill. Once I got back to the road, I ran across it really quickly. There was a big diesel that crossed the street right after me. He honked his horn at me as if I was in his way. When the truck was gone, I looked back across the road. I saw the shadow of the man in the fog, but that was all. I turned and ran to the nearest gas station, telling them what happened. The skeptical cashier called the police. If something was going on down under that bridge, they needed to know. The police found a wood-fueled fire under the bridge and a couple of dead animals, but that was all. And that was just a terrifying thing, and I can honestly say that I never wanted to experience anything like it ever again. Number 3. Along the gutter. Okay, this was weird. And I can understand immediately that some people might not believe this story. But I have to let you know that it is true. And it is scary. And this happened a long time ago, but I have always remembered it. It is mostly because a scene in Stephen King's It that has prevented me from telling this story, but I decided finally to tell it. I remember when I first moved out of my parents' house. I got a little dirty studio apartment in a crappy part of town. On the full other side of town, I got a job working at a Taco Bell. I worked a late night shift, so I was always walking home late at night. The area I lived in tended to get really foggy. It wasn't so bad that you couldn't see where you were going. It was sometimes annoying and sometimes pretty cool, really depending upon what mood you were in. This was a late night. The store closed at 4 in the morning. I was pretty exhausted and there were several of us there. The rest of the guys told me that they could tell I was tired, and they let me leave while they cleaned. I was so tired as I left the store, as I just trudged along. As normal, this early in the dark morning, the fog was present as I was walking. I didn't think about it too much, though. I was just exhausted and I wanted to get home. I was walking along the side of the road in the gutter. You know what I mean, the complete side of the road. I was really weary. If I was at home, I would probably fall asleep rather quickly. It didn't help that my eyes were going in and out of focus in the fog. And then I snapped out of it. I could have sworn that I heard someone talking. Yeah, someone talking isn't a big deal. But when you are walking around, alone in the dark, and you suddenly hear something, it startles you. I tried to listen. Then I heard something again. It was definitely a voice. I looked around, trying to see if anyone was there. Yeah, it was foggy, but like I said, it wasn't that foggy. I could still see around, and I kept hearing the voice, but I just couldn't see where it was coming from. Finally, I followed the voice enough to get around to where it was coming from. I got down there, and I finally saw where the voice was coming from, and it was more than one voice. And when I got further, I noticed that it was coming from a sewer grate. I walked up to the sewer and I leaned over to hear better. It was so weird, imagining that someone was in the sewer. I didn't even know that the sewer system itself was big enough to let people walk around. And then again, there were manholes around, and I suppose they wouldn't be otherwise. I looked down the holes in the grating, trying to hear better. I froze when I finally heard what was being said. I'll never forget it. It was distinct when a man said, "Grab his legs. We have to make sure no one ever finds him." And then, even though it was foggy, even though it was dark, I saw a man in the sewer. He was carrying something that I now had to assume was another person, and he wasn't alone. As I passed under the grate, one of the men looked up, and my eye met his right on. We stared at each other there for a second before I realized I needed to get the hell out of there. I was much closer to the Taco Bell than I was to home, so I took off and ran to the Taco Bell. My coworkers didn't believe me and wouldn't let me use the phone to call the cops. I couldn't use it on my own because only the manager had permission to use it, and he wouldn't let me. And by the time I got home, a ride from a friend, I just gave up on it. The guys had to be long gone. There was no way I was going to find them. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. I hope you're all doing good, and I'm a little sorry that it's been so long since the last video. I had a lot planned, but my last video, the teenage runaway video, was so overwhelming. It was so close to my heart, and I am so proud of it. I honestly feel like it was my best work ever. It was also my most draining work ever, and I needed to recover. But there is much coming up. I'm still working on the Hitchhiker play. I wasn't aware of how much work it was going to be, but I will get it out soon. I have a video collaboration with We Shouldn't Be Here of Thanksgiving stories on the way, as well as a video of Black Friday stories with my good friend Mortis Media. I believe this will mark our 13th collaboration. There will also be several true story videos with just myself narrating. Now, if you want to see print versions of this story, visit the Killer Orange Cat subreddit, where they have already been posted. Also, you can visit my sister's Killer Orange Cat merchandise store. She has an awesome Christmas sweater up right now, which you probably saw at the beginning of the video. The links to both are included in the description. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please consider hitting the subscribe button below, or use the icon of Ichigo that will appear at the end of this closing. feel free to leave a comment to let me know what you think of the video, and consider sharing it with someone you think might enjoy it. You can follow Ichigo and myself on Facebook and Twitter by using the links in the description. If you have a story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, email it to the address included in the description. My only requirement is that the story is original, meaning it has not been read on any other YouTube channel. And in the meantime, please don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.